The crux of this essay is about equal protection for all. And basically, it's looking at our current laws in the United States and looking at Scripture and kind of taking an overarching look at what is consistent and what is inconsistent. And it seems to be that there are some major inconsistencies between what our laws are across the board for unborn life, and also a lot of things that just do not line up with God's law and what God has to say in Scripture about life.
Okay, so installment number 4 of our journal is on the abortion issue, and I'm joined today on the Bible Professor by Sharayah Colter. Welcome, Sharayah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So, Sharayah, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're into, your ministry.
Absolutely. Well, yes, my name is Sharayah Colter, and my top job is that I am a mom of 2 little children. My husband and I live in North Dallas area, and I kind of wear, basically, besides my mom hat, 2 other hats. So on one hand, I run a communications business, and we help a lot of ministries and organizations and businesses just in their branding and their public relations and marketing. So my background is all journalism and communications. So that was kind of born out of that. I began that business when my husband was in seminary. And so we're now in our 11th year of that business, and it has just been, the Lord has blessed it and allowed us to just really help a lot of people along the way. And so it's been a joy to do that. And then simultaneously to that, we launched not very long ago, the Danbury Institute. And that is primarily a coalition of like-minded Christians who want to stand for primarily 2 things, life and liberty. And so that's a lot of sanctity of life issues. It's standing for children against the onslaught of transgender ideology that is after them. It's defending religious liberty and really looking at the founding of America and helping people to understand what the Christian underpinnings are so that we can kind of get back to understanding that our laws are based on something. And so this quest for a very secular country is really not in keeping with what the founders envisioned for the country. So all of those things kind of fit under what we're working on with the Danbury Institute. Basically, we're trying to help Christians and churches to stand for truth in the public square. So that looks like going to Washington, D.C. and just advocating on behalf of what our beliefs are as Christians, which we have found a really warm reception for there in Washington. And also then bringing good information back to people in their churches and helping them to know what's going on, what are the laws, what is coming down the pike, and how can people get involved. We talk to a lot of people and they say, I see things are not going well, but I just don't know what I can do about it. And as Christians, of course, we know the first thing we do is pray, and we should never, relegate that to a second thing to do. It's always our first thing to do, and obviously very powerful. But in line with that, also there are active things we can do to be salt and light in our communities, to stand for what we know to be true. And so we are just trying to help people to do that and to be good stewards of whatever time and resources we have.
Okay, good. I'm very thankful to have someone of your viewpoint and your passion to contribute the essay to our article, the article to our journal. Sharayah, I knew that you were no stranger to the pro-life issue. You've written a lot about it. And in fact, you gave me an essay in an earlier Festschrift I wrote a few years ago. You wrote on the pro-life movement. You actually chronicled it, the pro-life cause in biblical history and teaching, and the pro-life movement in the modern era. Now, I had said at the point, this was published in 2022, but we were writing these essays in 2021, and I had said at the moment that your essay was a bit prophetic. And you said near the end, before your concluding remarks, you said, modern-day abolitionists are increasingly hopeful that the 14th Amendment and recognition of personhood status will afford the same protective result for preborn humans. Though pro-life advocates generally share the same end goal of eliminating abortion, debate exists within Christendom of whether only total abolition can be sought or if incremental pro-life measures have merit as well. Well, it goes on talking about that, but you brought up in that essay the issue of the 14th Amendment possibly overturning Roe v. Wade, and with the Dobbs versus Jackson, that very year after this is published, lo and behold, wasn't the 14th Amendment a large part of that?
I think so. We have so much more work to do, but I am encouraged that I think when I look down the pipe, I think that the 14th Amendment gives us a lot of promise, because if we just get back to a consistent application of the law as already written, we should be able to get to a place where we say unborn life is life. And in America, it is already illegal to take someone else's life on purpose.
Right.
So we just have to get to a spot where our courts are recognizing what they have already recognized in pieces in different court cases and in legislation already on the books, and put that all into one cake bowl to mix up the cake that needs to be baked, which is protecting all people, whether they are born or unborn, under our laws.
And that's the upshot of your essay here, Equal Treatment for the Unborn. But go back a moment to the beginning and tell me, or tell my listeners how, because I want people to read your essay, but you set it up by talking about the idolization of females. Yes?
Yeah.
And how?
Yeah, I know that's a very unpopular thing to think about.
Mm-hmm.
But, as a woman, I think I am uniquely positioned to say this, because if a man says this, then they're going to be really just castigated for that right away, just based on not being a woman. But I am a woman, and I don't expect anyone to give me special treatment or preference because I am a woman. I mean, God makes men, God makes women. We're all of equal value. So, but in America right now, and really in the world at large, there has been a movement to go far beyond what are the normal and reasonable requests of women to say we want to be treated equally, which in America, thank goodness, we have got to that point where we can all vote. We are considered equal, but there has been an overcorrection. And so now we're to the point where if you're a woman, you are receiving, in America especially, special treatment. We have a line that has been going on really since the Kavanaugh hearings of believe all women. Well, we should believe the truth. And so we shouldn't just believe someone because of their sex or their gender. So that is just, it's really silly, but that just indicates how our country has moved, and our culture in general has moved to a point where if you're a woman, it's almost as if you can do no wrong. Or if you do something, you are not expected to endure the same consequences or ramifications for whatever it may be. And so there's just been an over pendulum shift that is not really accurate, it's not fair. So.
Yeah, and you use that word overcorrection a few times in your essay, but you also said that, just to segue into the upshot of your essay here, women's rights seem to supersede the rights of others, specifically preborn persons. So that's where your comments are going, right?
Right.
Yeah. And you go on to say, in the United States, a woman who kills or hires to be killed her 2-year-old child is rightly held responsible for that death, and is subject to the due process of law to determine her culpability and punishment. Conversely, a woman in the United States who kills or hires to have killed her 2-month-old baby in the womb currently faces no legal repercussions for that action. And that I think is the burden of your essay here. So can you talk about that just for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just really unbelievable that our laws actually are written in that way, that there was even some laws passed in the early 2000s that protected innocent life in the womb unless that life was taken by abortion. So it just really demonstrates and puts on full view the inconsistency there. Because if you have to go into your law and specifically highlight abortion as an exception, that really shows just a lack of equity there for children who are in the womb. Why does abortion receive special treatment? Why would a woman receive a special treatment for doing the same act to a child as they would certainly get in trouble for if the child was outside of the womb? As Christians, if we believe that life is life and life begins in the womb, and we believe that life begins at conception, then that life should be valuable, whether it is 2 weeks in the womb, whether it is 33 weeks and just about to be born and certainly viable, whether it is 2 weeks out of the womb, or whether it is 2 years old. When I was studying at Focus on the Family Institute, we had some people come in and really talk to us. And one of the things that has stuck with me that they said and really helped us to understand was this trot out the toddler. If you think about the line, there's not an arbitrary line for when is a life valuable. So if you want to say that a life can be killed in the womb, then let's look at that life just a few years later. What is the difference? The only difference between a baby in the womb and a 2-year-old toddler would be their location, their level of dependence, their age. So we can't really say that those things make you a person or don't make you a person. And we, in America, we don't say that if you get tired of your 2-year-old toddler, which certainly people do. I mean, I've had 2-year-old toddlers not very long ago. They're loud. Sometimes they need a lot from you, and they can become very inconvenient. And, a lot of the things that people who want to support reproductive rights or reproductive freedom would say about children in the womb is, they're getting in the way of me going to college, or they're inconvenient, or very hard, they're expensive, all kinds of things that you could still say about a child that's already out of the womb. So none of those can really be arguments that can be taken really sincerely, because we have to look at something beyond that. And that is whether a life is a life and whether that life has value. But if we want to get to a point where the country says we just don't believe that a life in the womb has value, a lot of people are getting to that point where they're being much more honest to say that. Even some very liberal talk show hosts have recently said, yeah, actually, I think, the pro-life people are being more honest about it, because if we're honest, I just want to say, it is a life, but I don't care. You should be able to kill it. At least they're being honest about their position there.
Yeah.
Very sad. And that is, atrocious that they would hold that view, but they're being honest that it's a life. And that's what our laws say about a child in the womb. If a man or a woman causes the death of an unborn child, many times in most states, that person will be held responsible for the death of not just that child, but if the woman was killed, then 2 counts of death. So how can we square that with saying, if you are someone else and you kill the child in the womb, you are held responsible. But if you're the woman, you're not. That just, if from a logical standpoint, that doesn't make sense or hold water.
That's right. You commented on the logical nature of this argument, and you mentioned, Senator Dianne Feinstein and how she wiggled that through the laws. And another court opinion, Webster versus Reproductive Health Services, you said, as demonstrated in this court opinion, abortion receives unique treatment. The ideals of justice and equality should propel Americans to question these instances of legal precedent. Logic and common sense demonstrated if a life in the womb is considered to be a person in one regard, should be considered a person in every regard.
Right. And so that just gives me a lot of hope, because I feel like half the work has already been done for us, even there by Dianne Feinstein, saying that if this, measure were to pass, it would be essentially saying that a life in the womb is valuable, and that life begins. And what point does life begin in the womb? And so thankfully, she's right. And we have said that. So we simply need to, as a country, look at what we have already said together.
But just
on the whole, and bring it
just
back
to be clear, Feinstein was not supporting pro-life.
No.
Right.
No, she certainly was not. Yeah, but
she's making it clear that the life begins at conception issue. If that's in the law, then
right. That was her option passing that was, if we pass this, we are basically saying life in the womb is life.
Yeah.
And
right.
So she didn't want to pass that.
Yeah, very good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just to wrap up, Sharayah, you wrap up saying something like this: the unequal treatment present in the quest to affirm preborn life as extinguishable should bring embarrassment to the political leaders, medical professionals, and legal scholars who perpetuate it, and advocates for the equal protection of children in the womb under the 14th Amendment should undertake diligently the task of highlighting this discrepancy and seeking a sufficient, consistent resolution, end quote. You mentioned medical professionals because back in an earlier section you had quoted from there are a group, the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. So, yeah, I don't think I even knew that organization existed. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate what they have said about, a lot of times the sticking points on, this discussion of pro-life versus pro-choice is, well, what do you do in cases that need to have the exceptions? So you have cases of life of the mother, rape, and incest. Well, dealing with the case of life of the mother, there has always, or for a very long time, been this quest to say, obviously we don't want the mother to die. Well, no, we certainly don't, because we're pro-life. So being pro-life is for life. But what we have to say is that these obstetricians have very clearly defined that an abortion is not necessary to save the life of a mother. If there is a life situation in which the life of the mother is in jeopardy, these physicians say you simply prematurely deliver that child. Now, the child might not survive. Right. The same as of a pregnancy in the fallopian tube. A child might not survive being moved.
But you didn't purposefully kill it.
Right. The intent matters so much. You didn't start that procedure with the intent to extinguish life. You started that procedure with the intent to save as much life as possible. And if in the process of doing that, the baby does not survive, well, that's a tragedy. But the intent was not to take its life from the beginning, and that matters. So I've talked with some people on Capitol Hill about this, and it's going to be a long road of trying to, navigate, because there's been such a long-held understanding of this in one way. But if we can get our laws to reflect the fact that that saving the life of the mother can be done through an early delivery, we need to be able to define those terms within legislation so that it's clear we are not advocating for abortion to save the life of the mother, but we are advocating for reasonable medical practices that still have life, preserving life as the goal, even if the outcome is tragic.
Okay, very good. Sharayah Colter, thank you for joining us about your essay you gave us in our journal. And tell us one more time your ministry and the website, the Danbury Institute.
Yes, the Danbury Institute can be found at danburyinstitute.org. And we would just be glad to connect with anyone there who wants to partner on just putting forth these pro-life, pro-liberty causes.
Okay, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. Thank you, Sharayah Colter. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Winstead.